Дуже хочу запросити нашого іноземного гостя, завдяки якому ця конференція є міжнародною, Дмитрія Теперика. Він з Естонії, проте живе в Україні і є виконавчим директором Міжнародного центру оборони і безпеки, керівник відділу «Стійка Україна». І він нам розкаже про загрози та подібність стійкості в цифрову епоху. Маленька ремарка. Доповідь буде англійською, тобто, знову ж таки, нагадую, якщо вам потрібні навушники, візьміть свої, будь ласка. Запитання можна задавати чи українською, чи російською, чи англійською, як вам зручно. Пан Дмитрій розуміє. Проте відповіді також будуть англійською. Знову ж таки, якщо вам потрібен переклад, візьміть свої, будь ласка, навушники.
Доброго ранку, шановні друзі, шановні колеги. Дякую організаторам, що запросили мене на цю конференцію. Мені завжди дуже приємно приїжджати в Україну. Моя країна, Естонія, є одні з найближчих друзів України. Сьогодні я зроблю свою доповідь англійською мовою. Дякую за увагу. So, as I told you that I will speak in English today, and I will do my best not to rush and to speak in so-called Estonian way, very slowly, that translators would be able to do their work. So again, thank you very much for having me here. It's always a pleasure. And my keynote, which I'm actually very proud about, that's not very often that I'm invited to be a keynote speaker, so I'm still not very old, but still kind of young professional. So my keynote will be devoted to a topic of cognitive resilience and the threats for cognitive resilience in the digital area. I looked at the program and I learned that other speakers after me will speak more in details about the issue. So my task is basically to give you a comprehensive overview about the challenges, and well, there's always one of the difficult tasks to be the first speaker, but I think I'm lucky not to be a speaker after the lunch or the last one. So let's go further. Just a very short background what we do in Ukraine. So, under the support of the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, my team ran a development cooperation program entitled Resilient Ukraine, Stійка Україна. That started in the year 2016, and then it was a decision to prolong the program for another 2 years. And I do hope very much that in 2020 the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs will decide to prolong the program for another years. And the main focus of the program is national resilience, basically different aspects of national resilience, Ukraine's national resilience. We focus mostly geographically on southeast of Ukraine, but what we learned already during 3 years that geography doesn't determine the different aspects of national resilience. So I do believe that many aspects of national resilience is applicable to different regions of your country. So we published several reports and analysis on that. I also presented them in Kyiv for your politicians and decision makers. Well, to be honest with you, the feedback wasn't very profound, since there are still many, how I say it politely, many politicians and decision makers in Ukraine with Soviet or post-Soviet mentality, and it's difficult to approach them with the different policy recommendations, but nevertheless we do our best to give them our experience and knowledge. So first of all, how we defined resilience as such. As it's stated here, that we see that resilience is basically ability of a nation. And there are two major points I would like to highlight, that the source of resilience is civil society, strong civil society. It's not the government. Civil society is the source of national resilience. That's experience already proven in the Baltic states, in my country, Estonia in particular. And the second point I would like to highlight is that regions actually are the solid basis for building resilience, not the capital. So in your case, resilience, national resilience, should be built on from the regions, from Lviv, from Mariupol, from Kherson, and so on. So it couldn't be done from top-down approach originated in Kyiv. My president visited Ukraine several times, and she was the first foreign leader who visited eastern Ukraine. Basically, he was the first head of state, visited the front line in eastern Ukraine. And, well, she defines resilience through empathy. And she thinks that resilience is also when the state basically protects your rights, your freedoms, and then leaves it to you how to enjoy the rights and the freedoms. Basically, the state doesn't interfere into your business. There are many aspects of national resilience, but today I would like to focus just on information and communication. But just for your knowledge and for the background, to show that national resilience is a very complex approach. It also involves social capital and economic development and other indicators. But today in my speech I would like to tackle it through the prism of information and communication. One of the reasons that actually we mapped different gaps in Ukraine's national resilience, and communication gap was one of the biggest. That's the reason I would like to focus on information and communication. So yeah, speaking about the gaps, our research mapped 5 major gaps in Ukraine's national resilience. This was value gaps, motivation gap, capabilities gap, objective gap, and communication gap. Well, I won't go through all of them. You can read it from the report available on the web page, but more precisely about the communication gap, what does it mean? So basically it's about 3 issues as we define them. Of course we can discuss it, we can argue, but in our program we divide it through 3 lenses. First of all, it's so-called communication security. It's all about narratives, it's all about symbols, it's all about mnematics. So basically it's all about the essence of communication. And then it's information security. It's mostly about the mass media. It's about information channels. It's about infrastructure of information, what keeps it together and allows to go signal through. And then of course it's about cyber security, about cyber tools and technology. And the reason why we have it all together, it's very simple, because it's almost impossible or very difficult to draw a boundary between 3 three domains: communication, information, and cybersecurity. Another reason is that our common enemy, the Russian Federation, very aggressive and unpleasant state nowadays, always have been, but well, our enemy also approach the three domains holistically. So in their military structures, they don't distinguish between communication, information, and cyber tools. Very often we see that information attacks precede or and follow cyber attacks. So in Estonia we also learning how to tackle the three domains altogether, not to draw strict boundaries between information, communication, and cybersecurity. And the key word, of course, or the key question is how sufficient and efficient should be our situational awareness regarding the present vulnerabilities and future threats and challenges. So what we try to do is basically to map the present vulnerabilities already existing within societies, different levels, at local, regional, and national level, and also try to apply methods of predictive analytics in order to see a little bit further, in order to be able to predict somehow emerging challenges, emerging threats. Well, that's based on different scenarios, and I will speak more about it in a few moments. But let's again speak about the title of my presentation, Threats or Cognitive Resilience in Digital Era. And so let's begin with the digital area, which is almost obvious for everyone. We are already, let's say, members of digital society. This device basically follows us constantly, 24 hours. We almost sleep with our mobile phones, we awake with our mobile phones. Well, I would argue that somehow we become more and more dependable on our mobile phones. In my country, in Estonia, we went almost crazy. I mean, our society is so digital that without digital tools and without internet, e-voting, e-banking, e-taxing, and everything it's already impossible to imagine our society functioning well. And that's a very strong dependency, I would guess, because developing digital tools, we don't take enough attention to developing our internal knowledge about human beings, because, well, as you know from psychology, our brain has very strict limitations. So, just about threats. In my country, of course, we have a complex matrix about different threats, mostly posed by the Russian Federation. Well, other neighbors we coexist with very friendly, but particular one neighbor is always a problematic one. And, well, unfortunately for my country, as for your country as well, it's an existential threat. And I'm not exaggerating. That's we learned from the history that the policy of the Russian Federation poses an existential threat to my nation, to Estonia. Not just to Estonia, to other Baltic states as well. Therefore, we are bound, we are obliged to take it very seriously. So, the Russian Federation doesn't see my country to be free. And of course, the Russia's hybrid toolbox is very diverse and has different tools, starting from economic ties and the Russian Orthodox Church, a very nasty organization. I'm sorry to speak it at this university, but looking at the activity of the Russian Orthodox Church in my country, and also knowing the situation in Ukraine, I should say that this is an evil organization. and other methods related to hybrid toolbox of the Russian Federation. But I will focus mostly on media influence, cyber attacks, and social media. And actually, all of them are implied in my country for already almost 25 years. After the re-independence of Estonia in 1991, we witnessed almost all of the tools continuously. So we are always on the radar of the Russian Federation, unfortunately. But yeah, about the digital age, just two pictures from January this year, which prove that we are in a constantly growing digital age, and the indicators show clearly that there are growing numbers of users, not just internet users, users of personal devices, but also users in social media. So our attention and our daytime mostly occupied by digital tools and digital information. As I told that technology actually is exponential, but we are not. And we must admit the strict limitations of our cognitive abilities of our brain. There are many research projects being done artificial intelligence, but if you compare the numbers of projects devoted to social sciences and humanities, then you see clearly vast disbalance. So we are very keen to research artificial intelligence, we are very keen to research social media and internet interactions and other different digital tools, but we are still have very unknown within ourselves. Well, and that's disturbing. For instance, the article from The Guardian a few days ago stated that almost half of the population of the European Union might have received Russia-linked disinformation. And that's mostly, of course, through digital channels. So can you imagine the scale of that kind of enterprise? Half of the population of the European Union might have received. That's something terrible. And of course, we should admit that, let's say, our German, French or Italian friends are more naive regarding that. They don't have profound experience or knowledge about the Russian occupation, about the Russian hybrid threats and tools. Well, they just consume the information from the sources they trust. That's about your country. What we did back in 2017, we mapped public profiles and public discussions in three oblasts: Eastern Oblast, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kharkiv Oblast. So basically, what were the topics, the most popular topics discussed on social media networks during the years, and which social media networks were most popular. And so what we learned that, for instance, about 20% of the public posts in Eastern Ukraine were ideologically charged. So somehow ideology or different political topics were present in the discussions. Almost 5% of all users in the three oblasts were ideologically active, meaning that they were creating and distributing political or ideological content. And typical terms of Russian propaganda were also present. And yeah, we also learned that the ban of Russian origin social media networks as VK and OK has had an effect, but eventually very limited and interesting. And that this pattern we are going to see on other slides as well, that certain information peaks they detected related to offline events. And that's Russia's proxies are very clever about. So they combine offline events, like let's say celebration of so-called Victory Day, 9th of May. So they reinforce it with digital tools on social media. And for instance, so here we see clearly that peaks are growing. Number of public posts related to this Великая Отечественная война, so the Great Patriotic War, and they were growing from year to year, and just way in all August. Later we also repeated with Dutch methodology the research in my country, in Estonia. What we learned that, for instance, there were clearly ideological traffic or NATO in Russian origin networks of PK and OK. And it's very much artificially driven. Also, the same peaks about the celebration of Second World War, always in May, but there always were some preparation periods before, so they started to do information campaigns just before that, and main peaks were in May, actually heavily reinforced 2015 and 16, not so much in 14 or 13. This is artificially created, mostly driven by the Russian and post-Soviet ideology. But we also learned, for instance, that we do social media monitoring in my country, that, for instance, such disturbing hashtags like #ExitEU, which is clearly in the interest of the Russian Federation, that discussions about the possibility for Estonia to leave the EU, the European Union, So that was one of the mostly widespread hashtag, and somehow it appeared in social media networks in Estonia. So we know that that's a foreign origin, so it's not very common to be Eurosceptic in Estonia, although now we have a very marginal party in coalition which advocates anti-European topics, but still most of the population are very pro-European. So this one is clearly artificial, and the origin from that is Russian language social media networks in Estonia. What else? Next year we expand our research on the Baltic states. So we decided to look deeper and compare the situation not just in Estonia but also in Latvia and Lithuania. So what we learned that almost 70% of the ideological posts were created by 10% of the users. So basically 10% of the users create 70% of ideological content on social media networks in the Baltic states. And by ideology, I mean all the topics related to the Soviet Union, to the Second World War, to recent history, to Russian Orthodox Church, to anti-Europeanness, anti-NATO, basically all the topics on the Kremlin agenda. We also detected that Russian information warfare against the Baltic states actually started since 2013. So we detected that ideological traffic was growing, which means that Russia was preparing for that. And you might know, or you might not, that starting from 2007, there were several programs launched at the so-called federal universities in Russia. There were 8 federal universities across Russia where bachelor, master and doctoral programs related to information warfare were launched. So Russia was preparing, Russia was investing its human capital and basically teaching the students on different levels that they could be able to wear the information warfare as we see it now. So these are the results that Russia invested, say, 10 years ago. What we witness now, let's say half of the population of the European Union might be affected by the Russian propaganda, and it wasn't created by day. There were investments made by the Kremlin 10 years ago. But I mean, we were naive. I mean, not we in Estonia or in the Baltic states. We always told that we are kind of, paranoid about Russia, or Russia called us Russophobes. But yeah, that's their problem. But nevertheless, yeah, again, this very similar peaks related to the celebration of so-called victory days in all 3 countries. Also, where the largest peaks were in Estonia, unfortunately, but nevertheless in Latvia and Lithuania as well. So, which means that these so-called agents of influence, Russia's proxies, internet trolls, they are very knowledgeable in combining offline events and reinforcing them online. We applied the method of clusterization of all public users in the Baltic states, or public users of social media in the Baltic states. And what we learned, that basically all the same users are creating and distributing posts across different topics. So nowadays, it's not a surprise that there are, let's say, so-called troll factories or whatever page internet activists and different online proxies. But for us, that was a surprise that even within the Baltic states, there are, let's say, some users who create and distribute public posts, memes, pictures about different topics. It could be about Russia, it could be about the Soviet Union. They also write about the defense forces, about the Second World War, and about Ukraine. So basically, it's kind of job for them to do that. And that was actually useful to show to our decision makers and politicians that they could take social media monitoring very seriously. Because, well, it's not a surprise that in a democratic society, it's discussable. Is the government allowed to monitor, say, conversations over social media? Well, our point was to prove that, well, first of all, there were public posts and public profiles, so there were no hacking related activities. So, and public discussions on social media might have an effect on formation of opinion. So therefore, monitoring of social media is a really valuable tool to understand what topic is being artificially pushed or artificially distributed. And we also mapped several so-called online reservoirs where disinformation and toxic propaganda were distributed from. So the scheme is very simple. That, as you might know, the groups in Facebook or in VK or OK are not attached to a specific country. They're just global groups, mostly administrated by users from the Russian Federation. But within the groups, there are also users from, I don't know, Estonia, Ukraine, or some other countries. And some certain topic is inserted in these groups, and then our local proxies, our local agents of influence take it from them and then distribute further nationally. That's a very simple scheme. Yeah, we also looked at YouTube, because YouTube is most frequently mentioned resource among other external links. It's almost 13% of all external links that in public posts and discussions, there were links to YouTube. And YouTube is a very efficient tool of Kremlin's propaganda. So what we mapped that, for instance, there were, as you might see here, 4.6 million videos related to Putin. Almost 1/3 of YouTube videos in Russian are related to the Russian president. That's disturbing. Let's say 21% of Russian language videos in YouTube are related to the Soviet Union. That's a tool how Russia basically reinforce nostalgia about the Soviet Union. So the people older or a little younger, they used to watch videos there. Well, anti-Ukraine on YouTube in Russian language is just 4%, but still there are big number of new videos created monthly, almost 12,000 videos created monthly on anti-Ukrainian topics. Yeah, and some other topics, but still, this is the evidence that Russia uses digital tools for its geopolitical goals, to achieve its geopolitical goals, and reinforce the application of Kremlin narratives. Well, that's your own research. The Internews Ukraine published last month, I guess, the analysis on VK in Ukraine. So the numbers are not so big, but still they're very, very active. So you can see which regions, or users from which regions are most active users, still are most active users of VK. As we know that the users in VK are most young people who read, well, not read the news, but basically who are used to listen to free music or watch free movies or interact with each other regardless the ban, so you learn quickly how to pass it by. So this is from Internews Ukraine. So you can read it from then. So tonight's coverage was on the first place regarding the numbers of users writing about the recent elections here. And also they made kind of interesting comparison about rhetorics on different presidential candidates. So almost all of them, of course, received many negative feedback on VK, but also some of them received many positive feedback. Mr. Zelensky. Yeah, there were posts in Russia. So, this is of course a good question. I am not speculating. That's for your experts to analyze why your future president received also many positive reactions in Russian on weekend. And there is also a lot of anti-Ukrainian rhetoric in general and some anti-Russian rhetoric, but clearly this is disbalanced. So all in all, we can conclude that social media are being used by pro-Russian agents, pro-Russian proxies in the Baltic states and in Ukraine in order to form public opinion. So in your case, of course, that was there were the elections. Well, in our case, is reinforcing old myth and anti-Europeanness and anti-NATO topics. But as a tool, as a digital tool, yeah, social media is heavily used by the Kremlin. So, just quickly about the personal and social vulnerabilities which are associated with the so-called computer propaganda. Of course, this increasing time we spend online and basically what social media is about competition for our attention. So we are not paying enough attention to other parts of our life. Social media tries to keep our attention focused on that device. It's of course about complex algorithms which are based on complex neuropsychological processes, and that's not a secret. But they know how to manipulate with your psychology, how to keep your attention. And it's, of course, they create information supersaturation, which basically means information house. And we are tired of continuously growing flow of information. We are oversaturated with different information. If we are, then basically we are in information chaos. So let's go through cognitive biases, which are described as our cognitive weaknesses, or with our cognitive vulnerabilities, which are basically exploited by our enemies. So I would guess that, of course, social media as such is not, of course, our enemy. Social media just a digital tool. But that's the question: who and how is exploiting social media as a digital tool in order to influence our perceptions, in order to influence our opinion. But the end goal, of course, is not just our perceptions and our opinions. The end goal is, of course, our behavior. So basically, for the Kremlin, or I don't know, for your Ukrainian politicians, it doesn't matter what they think. What matters, of course, how do you act, or don't. Well, it's much easier to make your not acting than, of course, acting. But perceptions and opinions are not actions, and influence operations are always about behavioral changes. And Russia, as an aggressive country, is mostly interested in changing our societal behavior. And of course, they learned the lesson, so I mean, this is not the secret that all of us and everyone has cognitive biases. The first complex So first part of, say, combined cognitive biases is related to our memory. So basically, we edit and reinforce some memories after the fact. That's how our brain does. We of course discard some specifics to form generalities, so we would like to generalize. And of course we store some memories differently based on our previous experiences. And this cognitive bias is heavily used by the Kremlin in order, just an example, in order to reinforce the Soviet nostalgia. So the older generation remember the time during the Soviet occupation, as we called it in the Baltic states, or time during the Soviet Union, of course with more positive emotions. Because, and the Kremlin knows that, and they know how to reinforce, they know how to inject positive aspects of Soviet nostalgia into information flow. And always based on cognitive biases. And the second part of cognitive biases is related to informational oversaturation I was speaking about. It's basically about too much information, about information house. So you are lost, you don't know where to go, what to do. And that's of course related that we notice things already primed in our memory, and we drawn to details, and we would like to read, have information which already confirms our beliefs, and so on and so forth. So that's easy to manipulate with our behavior. So if you have a lot of different versions about an event, then for you as a human being it's much easier to choose the one which the most relates to you, which basically confirms your previous beliefs. The third part of cognitive biases is of course not enough meaning. So it's mostly about so-called conspiracy theories. This bias supports conspiracy theories. So we tend to find, let's say, some patterns which don't exist in real life, but still we have some wish to combine different dots. And as you know, the Russian propaganda exploit conspiracy theories in a very creative way. So they have a lot of different versions of the event. And the last one, of course, that we need to act fast, but normally we don't, because we would like to oversimplify very complex processes. And as a result, we have the president in America like Trump, because normally we psychologically prefer very simplistic approach to different, to difficult problems. Well, it's all about, populism, that good promises and simple solutions somehow appeal to us better than complex proposal. Yeah, so we normally we don't act fast, and that's the problem also for many European countries and for the European Union as such, that in combating disinformation we are always reactive, so we don't lead the process. We always react on something that Russia did or Russia is doing. And of course, we don't have, let's say, a common European response, because as normally within the European Union, the first step is the discussion. I guess you can imagine how long discussions would take within the European format. So, with all the things that are discussed, it is always almost too late. Yeah, and for us, of course, it's very important to understand that any communication between different groups within society and different governmental institutions or different sections is a potential target of information aggression. The low numbers of public trust towards your governmental institutions in Ukraine is clearly an indicator, is clearly a mark that trust was a target, trust was attacked. For me, when I speak with my Ukrainian colleagues and my Ukrainian friends, there's always the question why different groups within society basically don't trust each other, why civil society in Ukraine doesn't trust the government, the national government, the regional government. And it's not about the corruption. Corruption is just one of the smallest. But yeah, basically the trust as a result of discommunication or miscommunication is a target for information aggression. Yeah. So what we should do, of course, we should understand our enemy in a better way. And that's a big challenge because we think that if we have a common border with Russia, then we know them. Well, I would argue that you here in Ukraine, you know Russia much better than we in the Baltic States, and we in the Baltic States, we know Russia better than, let's say, our friends in France or the United States. But still, we should continuously improve our understanding what's happening there, basically what they're thinking about. My suggestion is just to think that Russia, of course, would like to cause irreversible behavioral changes in our society. Russia is actually getting poorer, more hungry, therefore more bitter. So there's no prospects for us to hope that Russia would be friendlier, nicer, because internal problems within Russia are just accumulating, and that anger that they're heating up will be directed outside. And yeah, this is something we learned for many years, that Russia is good at creating information chaos, deepening our communication apathy, enhancing cognitive blindness of the expert community. What Russia does, it of course projects a strong monopoly on such topic as Second World War, the Soviet Union, Russian language and culture, the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church. This is one of the main topics which are always present in the Kremlin propaganda, also in digital channels on social media. Russia is leading globally anti-EU and anti-NATO campaigns, and the respective narratives basically are migrating from the east to the west, bypassing Ukraine, the Baltic States, and so on and so forth. And therefore, you here and we there in the Baltic States, we are on the front line, so we observe the migrating anti-NATO, anti-EU narratives. What about applying even more digital tools on social media we were speaking about? Also about reinforcing mutually offline events, just online campaigns. Well, they really do good social psychological profiling of our societies, so since they maintain wide networks of different local proxies and so-called agents of influence. And I'm not speaking about, secret services. I'm speaking about those ideologically charged and all financially motivated citizens in our societies, within our societies, who are doing some job which is useful for the Kremlin. So basically they know our vulnerabilities, they know which problems are in each particular society. Being it, let's say, problems related to jobless people, being it problems related, I don't know, to new railway, problem related to garbage, basically everything which could be exploited for polarization, everything which could be exploited as social unrest, and for that, of course, they need some local people who would inform them. And well, anyway, we are not naive anymore about that. So what should we do? Of course, we should improve our and expand our horizontal internal communication, which means that different groups within the society should, and different institutions within society should communicate more horizontally than vertically. And you understand that's still a big challenge for Ukraine because it's a heavily centralized country. But from my point of view, the process of decentralization started several years ago here would be a good example how horizontal communication could be improved. Of course, we should intensify and diversify communication to foreign partners. There are friends of Ukraine within the European Union, but almost all of them, have their own, let's say, political or social-economical agenda. I would argue that Ukraine should speak not with just big players like in the United States or France or Poland, but also doing more public diplomacy of high quality towards, let's say, Nordic countries and the Baltic states and other countries. What we need and what we're also doing, or to try to do within our program, is educating different decision makers and stakeholders on practical aspects of information, resilience, strategic communication, and cyber security. We were surprised that in some regions in Ukraine, on the local or regional level, there are basically no good competences related to this issue. Decision makers and people who are related to communication, information, and cybersecurity are very, very poorly educated and unmotivated. And this is not critique. I mean, I am a good friend of Ukraine, and that's our contribution. We would like not just to point out the problem, but also to provide tools how to educate and train the people. But very poor knowledge base and not having enough tools and skills is a great threat. Yeah. So what else we could do, and of course there's several policy related recommendations we also presented. I just would like to point out the last one, that in order to immunize our society against hybrid threats, what we should do as communicators, as journalists, as media experts, that we should create or reactualize our own strong frame, national myth, meanings and heroes. And that's, I'm telling you from our experience, what we almost lost belief, not in Estonia, but in general within the European Union. We almost lost our confidence in European values. So the rise of Eurosceptics and populism within the European Union is a result that we were actually more effective, more productive in exposing the European values to our neighbors, to Ukraine, to Moldova, to Georgia, but we were basically not good enough at explaining European values to ourselves. Mostly the average European doesn't know or doesn't believe what it does mean, like European values. So what we should do, of course, we should reinforce our own strong frame of values and meanings. And of course, what we should do do more personification of our own values, because they don't speak for themselves, but persons do. Those active persons who stand for practical values, they must be highlighted, because values are very much abstract concepts. We have to find our own personal heroes, basically, people among us who would communicate that. And the last slide, of course, that I always finish my presentations, that words are not enough. Since our enemy would like to achieve behavioral changes, we should always think how we act, because threats, promises, good intentions don't amount to action. Дуже дякую за увагу.
So now if you have questions, either English, Ukrainian, Russian.
Дякую дуже. Марина Довженко, медіакомунікації епоху. Ви показували дослідження, в якому було вказано, що лише 4% населення Східної України є політично активними в соцмережах. Як ви вважаєте, чи це мало, чи це достатньо, і що впливає на те, що люди не настільки активні ідеологічно? Чого вони уникають? Дякую.
I just would like to specify that basically there were 4.5% of public users, not all the populations of others, but public users on these social media networks that were ideologically active. So basically they were the users who were distributing or creating and distributing ideological or political content on social media. And well, that's actually not a big number, but the vulnerability is that if these users are somehow related, let's say, to pro-Kremlin ideology, or they can be manipulated by your internal politicians. So these are the users who are, let's say, kind of informational gatekeepers. There is not enough critical mass of different users who would, create discussion or would create, let's say, different opinions, but just 4.5%. And this is a kind of critical vulnerability. A very small group of public users, of people, if there are like real people behind the profiles, would be, and actually we believe they are, manipulated in one way or another. Just to clarify that it's not wise to talk always about, let's say, pro-Kremlin ideology, pro-Kremlin proxies or agents of influence. So normally, of course, and again, it's related to cognitive bias. That's for us in the Baltic states and here in Ukraine, it's much easier to blame Putin and Kremlin for everything, but that's not true. And these digital tools and these tactics of manipulations, as they were much more successfully implemented during your own elections. They were implemented in Estonia during our parliamentary elections by our own political parties. Nothing to do with the Kremlin. The thing is that now we have to be, let's say, more precise, more accurate in distinguishing which is a foreign influence and which is domestically raw influence. And with foreign influence, it's much easier if, let's say, this small group of active profiles are somehow related to the Kremlin or to the Kremlin's network. Well, practically, it's possible to shut them down. Which is not the case for your own domestic audience, your own citizens, because that will violate different freedoms. So I think that's our biggest challenge. It's not to blame the Kremlin for everything bad, but to be wise to distinguish. Although the tools and the patterns are very, very similar. I mean, they might even learn from each other. I don't know. The tools and the patterns are very similar, but the origin and the intentions they're different.
Thank you. Okay, I have one. You are very open about calling Russia Federation the main threat, and you said something like Moscow Orthodox Church is pretty nasty, organizations for chemical. It's like official policy, which is like on social media and with hashtags and everything, or is just your personal opinion? I mean, Estonian official policy.
Well,
so
fortunately, I'm not the Estonian government official, although I used to work for the Estonian Ministry of Defense before joining the think tank. Well, again, I'm not Russophobic or not anti-Russia as such. Even, my first name is... But the thing is that, first of all, Ms. Zakharova listed me into a ban list for entering Russia, so I'm persona non grata in the Russian Federation. Thanks God. Well, I'm not willing to travel there anyway, but still. The thing is that we have to start a discussion within our countries in order to understand what kind of responsibility for all the crimes Russia have done, also digital crimes, not just physical crimes, but also digital crimes, and for all that Russia have done, who is going to be responsible? The only person like President Putin, the Kremlin regime in general, the Russian state, or all the Russian people who live in Russia, let's say, like common guilt as Nazi Germany was accused of. I think that discussion is needed because it's not, let's say, it's not actual maybe for today, but it will be very, very actual in several years, because within our societies we should understand it. Well, speaking about the activities of the Russian Federation against my country, they are based on the evidence. So I read every month the reports from the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service. I read the reports from the Estonian Internal Security Police, and I do trust my government. And I see the evidence from the public research and analysis what's being done on social media. I see the evidence from the reports. I do know my history of my country, and that's my, of course, personal opinion about the activities of the Russian Federation. But this opinion is very much shared by vast majority of population of the country.
Yeah. Питання?
Я знаю, що на початку нашої війни, 14-15 рік, прибалтійські колеги активно працювали з нашими військовими на тему інформаційного захисту. В тому чи іншому обсязі. Мене цікавить, наскільки ця інформація зараз активно намагалися її донести до наших урядових або неурядових інституцій, і чи є якийсь відгук, якась реакція? От ви говорите, що ви бачите реакцію вашого екстренського уряду і чи є якась така інформація від нашого уряду, чи є якісь дії?
I'm glad to confirm that let's say some experts within the Ukrainian armed forces, Ukraine, and within the Ukrainian's Minister of Foreign, Minister of Information Policy. I know that this is some disputable institution, but still, well, there are some good experts who are eager to listen and who are eager to take our recommendations on board. And if you compare the situation in 2014 to nowadays, it's not maybe visible for you living here, almost influenced by your informational surroundings. But for us, it's clearly visible that it's a huge progress. And my suggestion would be for you as Ukrainian citizens, really value this progress. Because building national resilience is a very hard task, takes years. We started it in Estonia almost 30 years ago. So now we are on the position, and we are still continuing that. So now we are on the position that we might have, let's say, a little bit better results than, but you started it, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. Well, the thing is that, Ukraine needs to be focused on that. Not to change the vector after every election. And this is not the criticism, just to stay on the road and to stay focused. But clearly, on communication, on strategic communication side, Ukraine is doing good progress. I mean, there are many things that could be done better. But I mean, you are still country at war. You're not, you're a rich country, but resources are not managed properly still, especially at the central level, national level. But given this situation, I think overall assessment would be good. I mean, comparing what happened 14 and now, so that's good. Well, even the public diplomacy, I mean, we don't do respect or non-respect, but your almost former President Poroshenko and Klimkin, they did a great job in terms of public diplomacy, in terms of Ukraine's image abroad. What should be done more? I mean, in order to attract more positive attention, more even investments, and not to project Ukrainian problems abroad. I mean, because when I speak with my European colleagues, I mean, they are always aware about the Ukrainians' problem, about the war, about the corruption, and about the poor management of different social economical processes. But myself, traveling in Ukraine, in different regions, I see also many positive things happen. Why not to project via public diplomacy also many positive achievements which Ukraine has in culture, contemporary Ukrainian movies, tourism regions, and so on and so forth. So that could be, I think, the next big challenge for the new president and for the new government to balance this the agenda of public diplomacy. Because mostly Europeans, I mean, they are naive, they are tired of listening or reading about the war and not speaking about corruption. That should be off the topic.
Okay, absolutely. You said that Ukrainians need more education in this resilience. What did you mean by that? What exactly? How do you imagine that? What is it?
Well, Ukrainians are very creative people, honestly, even more creative than Estonians, believe me. And you have critical mass of talented people. Even these people who are going abroad, that's a challenge how to attract them back. So in my country, we created a concept of so-called hybrid hygiene and informational hygiene. So basically, very practical tools how you work with your personal devices. I mean, how you protect your information. And this is not, let's say, for IT techie guys. That's basically for everyone, because we are already living in digital age. And also about how you consume information, knowing that information consumption might have effect on your behavior. And this is not clear for everyone, because we think that everything we read, watch or listen to, it's not related to our actions, but it is. And the thing is that how to basically create, it could be whatever training course, it could be classes within at school or at universities on two subjects, cyber hygiene and information hygiene.
Media literacy.
Well, yeah, for our European and American colleagues, they prefer this term media literacy. So we could, in my country we called it a little bit different, but more precisely on practical aspects and basically tools, how you do it with your own hands-on skills, basically. Not about kind of high theory, but about practicalities. Because every day we work with this, every day we consume something, and it's actually very surprising how you can achieve either small tangible results if you do it, let's say, not on general level, but on very practical level, let's say, at some towns in Ukraine, how you, let's say, train media experts, journalists, let's say, IT guys, internet service providers, those who prepare decisions. Well, that's actually my last point, I promise. My big problem with colleagues with Ukraine, that they think that they should direct every actions at decision makers, politicians and other important decision makers. The thing is that decisions should be prepared. Someone actually writes, someone composes, someone creates the decisions, and then he or she brings it to be signed or to be decision to be taken. So what we would like to achieve, basically to draw into our target audience, target group, those people who are responsible for preparing decisions. Because decision makers are very busy, occupied, they can decide whatever. So basically those who are behind these things. And for training them on these practical aspects of information and communication resilience is very deep.
Дуже дякую. Давайте подякуємо Дмитрію.